Greetings and welcome to Conversations at Noon on the Connecticut Freedom Trail. I'm Tammy Denise. In 1995, the General Assembly established the Connecticut Freedom Trail to recognize the struggle for freedom in the Black and African American communities. The Freedom Trail officially opened September 1996 and it is overseen by the Amistad Committee. Today, we are going to hear from a storyteller by the name of the Greatheart Griot, better known as Andre Keitt. Andre is an education and programming consultant at the Farmington Historical Society. As a child, he felt a strong connection to the cultural arts and says that storytelling is in his blood. He received a Bachelor's of Arts in English from the South Carolina State University and worked during outreach, marketing, writing, teaching, and performance arts for such places as the Hartford Public Library, the Dallas Public Library, the Greater Hartford Arts Council, as well as the Bushnell and Connecticut Humanities Book Voyages. He is serving as the artistic director for Journey Writers. He also facilitates discussions and performs storytelling through the Connecticut Humanities Council's Kid program, Book Voyagers. Andre Keitt, welcome again to Conversations at Noon.
Well, thank you so much for welcoming me today. And I'm really excited about what we're going to be talking about today and happy to be here once again. I think it was about a year ago I visited with you all. So thanks for the invite. Okay, I guess you want me to get right into it. So today we're going to talk about the Farmington Historical Society's Freedom Trail tour that we started doing brand new last year. We call it Odyssey of the Amistad, a Trail to Freedom. And I just want to talk about that experience from one Black man's opinion and how I felt about being involved in that whole process for a while now. Give us free were the words purportedly retorted by Joseph Sincay in the courtroom during the third trial of the captured Mende from the slave schooner La Amistad. They were actually the words of Kali, one of the male children of the Mende. And these words are seen in his original letter to the retired president, John Quincy Adams. Kali was seeking to compel the former president to come out of retirement and serve as their attorney to help them. Now, regardless of who said it, the fact is the captive Mende, who've been ripped from their homes, forced like many Africans before and after them through the Middle Passage, were eventually set free after what turned out to be one of America's first civil rights cases. And they won. And they were set free. But now that they were free, they were left in limbo, like millions of other former enslaved people set free with nothing to show for their pain and suffering. Therefore, they had no resources and no prospects, no funds to get them back home to Sierra Leone. The Amistad Mende were more fortunate than most. They had the kindness of strangers in the abolitionist town or village of Farmington, Connecticut, where they were offered refuge while they raised money doing tours for 8 months in 1841. Now, fast forward a little over 20 years later, in 1865, when the Emancipation came, where Lincoln set the enslaved free, right? Well, we know that wasn't really the case, and there were several pseudo-emancipations afterwards. For example, does the term Juneteenth ring a bell? The facts are that the enslaved people were just turned out without any kind of real help. In Nicole Hannah Jones's New York Times bestseller, The 1619 Project, it cites a chapter. The chapter on justice talks about how 40 acres and a mule were promised and in some cases received by certain freed enslaved people who had been formerly enslaved people. And a lot of rigmarole went around and turned around that the government ended up taking the 40 acres and a mule away from the people that they had awarded it, to whom they had awarded it, and stop that whole reparations deal altogether. Again, the enslaved were left empty-handed with empty promises of empathy. In fact, in many cases, when the enslaved opted to take their fate in their own hand and actually leave the grounds of the plantation, many of them were bushwhacked by embittered former slave holders who just couldn't let a good thing like free labor go. Imagine that, being killed for having the audacity of exercising their literal liberation. In many cases, in present day America's super system, brown and black people are led under false pretense to believe that they are being fairly considered as equal in the eyes of the laws of the land, i.e., Jim Crow, which was definitely not separate but equal, the Voting Rights Act, giving temporary voting rights. And if you are driving while black, attending college while black, walking in your neighborhood, and on and on and on while black, which are all living activities to which we as blacks have a right, we still today, in 2023, could be pulled over by police enforcement and killed. In 1865, when my great-grandfather Paul was emancipated along with other freed and formerly enslaved blacks, he did not want his slave name. This gives us some insight into who Paul really was. You see, Paul's slave job was to drive the little white children in the one-horse buggy to the one-room schoolhouse. He would sit under the structure, which was up on pilasters, and listen through the floor to the lesson. That man learned to read and write, leaning his back up against a pilaster and pressing his ear to the air. He became educated. It is with that knowledge that he armed himself, along with a stick, to some sand, scratching letters into the rich, dark earth until he came up with his own new name, Paul Greatheart. Eventually, Paul married Martha Ann Snelling, and they had 12 children. The baby of the 12 children was my grandmother, Martha Ann Greatheart. We called Martha Ann Greatheart, my grandmother, Mama Thompson. But to her contemporaries, she was affectionately known as Baby. Now, we couldn't call her Baby because we'd get the mess slapped out of us. Calling her Baby was like calling her by her first name. And everyone knows you don't call grown people, your senior, by their first name. A child needed to stay in a child's place, after all. Mama Thompson loved to tell us this and other mesmerizing stories of our family after the emancipation. She told us stories of our family from slavery. These same stories track us all the way from then until now. And because of the ingenuity and the intellect of Paul Greatheart, I, of course, had to become the Greatheart Griot. And with this moniker, I have taken on the telling of our family stories as well as several other tales of my Black heritage. One of these stories about emancipation and the lifestyle of those after slavery that I take pride in facilitating is that of the Amistad Mende, their time after the triumphant civil rights case and their time in Farmington, Connecticut. Some people like to argue that the Mende captives from La Amistad weren't really slaves, and they weren't. Although they were tricked into thinking they were headed back home by their captives, they did succumb to some of the same kinds of misfortune that many brown and Black Africans did. They were brought to early America through the Middle Passage. They suffered the indignation of being imprisoned, and they had to learn a new culture to survive, and they had to prove that they were not savages from the dark continent, and damn it, they did it. Now, prior to my encounter with the Farmington Historical Society, they had been conducting a Freedom Trail tour for several years, decades even. But to their credit, they realized they could improve upon their motto, their very approach to the retelling of the Amistad trials and tribulations. I came into the picture because they had decided to bring in the perspective of the brown and black people who share in the heritage of the Mende. So enter me, the Greatheart Griot. That was in 2016. I can't believe that was nearly a decade ago. My mother fell ill and died that summer in August, and talks with the Farmington Historical Society, they fell apart. And it wasn't until 2021 that I would run into them again. A whole year after that, they had revamped and created what I call the woke script. It was right smack in the middle of COVID-19 when I swooped in, but not like a superhero and conqueror, corrector of all and all around know-it-all, but as an editor, a storyteller, and an ally that would put a natural, non-lecturing spin on what had been reconstructed, written by the Farmington Historical Research Team in 2020. It was a natural fit. In fact, I felt like Joseph Sinkay, or let's go by his real name, Singbe Pia. I felt like he was returning home. Yes, it felt like home in many cases. It felt as if I had met friends. I know I made new friends and had learned that I had actual family. I don't believe in coincidences. And if you've been listening to this story, I've purposely paralleled my personal family story with the Amistad Mende story because I too believe, like the real life individuals in our tour, Odyssey of the Amistad, A Trail to Freedom, I believe that I was meant to tell the story and to live these experiences. As I mentioned, Farmington Historical Society's team of Joanne James, Sarah Willett, and Kim Silva had written a revised, aware, and woke script, switching the focus from a model that changed the abolitionist images in the 1840s from the white saviors of the Mende to a story of two groups of people who learned from and helped one another. I remember asking, with my best Southern South Carolina by way of Connecticut dialect, are y'all sure y'all want to talk about some of this stuff? You aren't afraid that this will be labeled as too much like critical race theory? At the time, DeSantis was just beginning to kick up the the racist rhetoric of many Southern and Midwestern states' propaganda. I remember Sarah saying to me, no, we want to go. We want the good and we want the bad to be reflected here. I was amazed and impressed. Frankly, I was thinking to myself, it's fine for them. They're not a black man with face and skin like this. And when the popo comes, I'll be the one dragged away. Yeah, I said that. And I thought that too. Because they seemed to have the courage of their convictions at that moment, I pressed on with my listening and reading, and I did what I do best. Sought to tell the stories lying just beneath the surface of the calming waters. I sought to make waves. I took that fine script and together we edited it into a more storytelling type program, changing the opening lecture into an opening presentation, hired brown and black actors and storytellers to host the tour spots to help tell the story of the daily life of the Amistad Mende, who found themselves sheltering in the abolitionist village of Farmington, Connecticut. We were intentional in focusing on the highlights of the individual Mende free persons as much as possible, given what facts were unearthed from the letters of the abolitionists, the colorful Hale Woodruff murals, and the pencil drawings of William H. Townsend, drawn by the artist when the Mende were imprisoned in New Haven, Connecticut. the piercing looks of determination in each of the captive's eyes palpable, even as one peers into those penetrating eyes in those sketches today. We pulled out the best of the letters from the abolitionists and made them more dimensional, bringing them to life for real. Poring over the newest 2020 script with the researchers, I wanted to enhance instances by isolating moments of sensitivity, vulnerability, and pathos. And when we deliver the tribute to the Tunxes, for example, we approach the sins of white colonialism with a delicate but deliberate confession of sorts. We acknowledge that we are situated in the homeland of the Native Americans called the Tunxes. Their ancestral lands date back almost 15,000 years. Can you imagine that? That's a long time for the Tunxes to be the caretakers of the land. We recognize the legacies of settler colonialisms and its impact. At the Farmington Historical Society, we strive to help preserve the Tunxes' stories, their contributions to the maintenance of the land, and to give voice to the Tunxes, protecting their legacy for future generations to come. And as a man of color, it was important for me to deliver those lines in a certain way, an authentic way, in a manner that didn't seem patronizing, but proud. As a part of this authentic movement, I feel my Farmington Historical Society's team wanted that truth to be translated and transformative. And that's my job, and I take it seriously. In fact, my objective is to make my role in no way tokenized. Other ways we tried to isolate and bring pathos to certain moments was to personalize and humanize the Mende. The focus this time around is on the Mende, who they were, what their lifestyle was like. One of the stories that I like to tell to help humanize the Mende, because it was a task they needed to do to survive when they were here all those years ago, was to tell the story, and I like to tell the story of a man named Chamberlain who drowned in the Farmington River, and how the Mende continued way after the white abolitionists and inhabitants, citizens of Farmington, they were tired of diving down under the water to try to find him. Apparently he had been submerged under the water. He was going to drown. He was drowning. He was actually dead. They were trying to recover his body. And Joseph Sinkay Singbe Pia and others of the Mende men kept diving down and going down way after it was dark and way after everybody else gave up. And when asked why they persisted, they were said, because he is our brother. And another story that I saw in the letters of Charlotte Coles was that Charlotte found one of the Mende men attractive. And I remember sitting down with our crew and we were reading the script, and we were actually quoting from the exact letter, reading from the letter. And when you read from the letter, it's one thing, but I wanted to take that letter and make it dimensional and bring it to life. So we have a real person portraying Charlotte, and we have her portraying her attraction to this young Mende man as Jungle Fever. Yeah, I said it, Jungle Fever. So I wanted to pull in as many times as I could, times that I could relate what was happening in our world today, at least the 20th and the 21st century, to how things were back then. And I know young women, girls, would find that attraction kind of cute, and I knew that that would draw some attention, and I want to I guess polarize, push that out there. And so we called it our jungle fever moment. There's another moment when you come to see the tour, we call it the Karen moment, because of the popular, I don't know how popular it is, but we call a white woman today who doth protest too much and is complaining about Black people doing different things. We call her a Karen today. We know that. And the kids know that, and the families know that, and people just know that. So we have a Karen moment where we've got a young woman that interacts with me as I'm doing my opening presentation, but it brings to light what was going on back then is still going on today. There's another story where Keitt saw a man in town, prominent figure in town, maybe his contemporary, who was wearing, or counterpart, who was wearing a really fancy coat. And he thought, well, I'm of that same nobility and that same social status. I should have one too. And the abolitionist villagers purported to say that the Mende could walk around and be free. And so Keitt went into the store and ordered a coat and got the coat and wore it. And that kind of shocked some people that he had the audacity to want to look like the higher level socialites in the town at that time. But these are more ways to focus on the Mende, to humanize them, to let them know they have feelings, let you know that they have feelings too. Now, that story we don't have in the tour, but I like to tell it because it's one of the things that it spoke to me, and I was able to address what I was trying to do in regards to bringing things into a relative situation where people could actually relate. What makes the tour that we're doing now different than what was done before? Well, when I got there, I was told it's a 1984 model and we want to change it. So it's definitely not a 1984 model anymore. And we don't have one person leading folk around to the 9 stops, approximately 9 stops on our particular Amistad tour. We have one person leading them around, and that person is not telling each story of each stop. But we have that one person leading you around or guiding just to get you from place to place. And then we have actors and storytellers either portraying characters or telling a story about what's going on the trail, what happened as you walk in the footsteps that the Mende walked. And the storytellers are wearing Afrocentric outfits like this kente cloth shirt that I'm wearing. And the reenactors are portraying folks from the past. They're wearing period outfits. So that makes it a little bit different. And most of the people who are relating the story, they're people of color. So it's coming from a Black perspective. And behind the scenes, people are getting ready and excited about it. We play a video that you come in and see. So we're trying to attract you by your different senses. You can hear music. You can see pictures of the Mende up on the screen. I started to bring that today, but I wanted to talk to you and want you to focus on the storytelling itself. And we also talk about Black governorship, because one of the characters that you'll meet is Governor Freeman. And the Black governorship during the 18th century, Hartford was home to 2 governors simultaneously, one white and the other Black. The white governors exercised official power under Connecticut's colonial charter and later its state constitution. The Black governor exercised customary power over the community's Black residents. The position of Black governor served 2 purposes. Whites believed the Black governor would have influence over the slaves and freemen in the town, allowing the election to appear generous and equitable. but to white colonists, it was the means to control a potentially volatile population. To Black residents, enslaved and free, the election of a leader gave them a person of authority to whom they could run and turn. The Black governors were men of stature and wisdom whom people of color could trust to hold the position. The man had to be someone with that the white and Black populations thought was respectable and good reputation. And even if they had different ways, those two groups, of assessing those qualities, the candidate's peers had to elect him for a 4-year term. Well, I can't tell you everything in 90 minutes, but just know for this part right here for Black governors, the one that you may see if you come visit us that you will see is Governor Freeman. And there's also Fannie Freeman there, who I'll let you come to the tour and see, but she had a lot to do with helping the Mende, and she was a businesswoman. But that last name, Freeman, was a name that a lot of enslaved who became free chose because now they're free. So they were free men. I don't remember any names for free woman, though. But basically, this is what I mean when I say bringing it to life, bringing those people, those characters, those times to life for real. Ladies and gentlemen, give us free.
Thank you, Andre. That was wonderful. I really appreciate the approach that you have brought to the Farmington area so that when they're now telling stories, they're actually telling the Black narratives from a Black perspective and they actually have that representation because representation definitely matters. So thank you so very much for your hard work. It is greatly appreciated. Before we get to the Q&A, I need to do a little housekeeping that I didn't do at the top of the hour. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in whatever platform you're on. Please put them into your chat box or question box, and we will answer those. Please fill out the survey to let us know what you want to see or hear, and just let us know how we are doing. We greatly love hearing from you and getting your feedback. Our next talk will be June 27th, so stay tuned for those details, but it will be another conversation at noon on June 27th at noon. Now, Andre, with your presentation, you talked of how you brought it out from a different perspective. Can you tell us what was how did you do that? What was your process of bringing it out, and how did you choose which people would play which character or which persona?
So a 3-part question. Okay.
You know how we do.
So again, once I arrived at the doorstep of Farmington Historical Society, they had already, to their credit, come up with a new script. They didn't have a chance to watch it unfold because it was right at the beginning of the onslaught of, the world health crisis, the pandemic, COVID-19. So when I met them, we were mask wearing. We would go to I got the tour, walked around and saw, the different stops on the Freedom Trail in Farmington. And I did a lot of listening and a lot of questions. That's what us storytellers do. We do a lot of listening. We ask a lot of questions and we do a lot of reading, and then subsequently we do some writing. So I looked at the script that was there, and the researchers and I sat down in the meeting house in Farmington where Joseph Sinkay or Singbe Pia and the other Mendes would worship. And we read through the script. And as we read through the script, I saw opportunities to take this and make it more story-like. I saw that the opening lecture needed to be one story. So when you come visit us, or anyone comes to visit us, you'll see that I'm telling a story about what happened to the Mende once they came to Farmington, how they arrived there, the mode of transportation. And I knew right away that some of the characters, I'll just give you an example. For Charlotte Coles, we were just going to have somebody there reading that particular script at that stop. But when I saw that Charlotte had jungle fever, I said, oh, this would be really good for someone to play this part and to be giggling about it and coy about it, to give her dimension. I think it'll be a whole lot more interesting. And that was my whole um, idea, to make sure that it was engaging and that we weren't talking at people. That was the whole thing. I didn't want us to be talking at people. I wanted us to become those people and to bring people along on our journey. And I think that we've been quite successful at doing that.
For some of our audience, they may not know what jungle fever is. Can you please explain what that term really means?
Um, jungle fever. It's if you it's you saw Spike Lee had a movie out, Jungle Fever, back in the, I think it was in the 90s. And it's basically when somebody white thinks somebody black is cute. So it might not sound so positive. It might even be derogatory to some people. But I'm sorry. I find humor and found humor in Charlotte Cole's batting her eyes. And, you know, one thing we'll learn about Charlotte is that she felt what she felt and she acted upon it. So I thought that, young girls or women would find that interesting, because maybe secretly they've seen somebody black that they thought was cute. You love that, don't you? You love it. You can't believe it. She's like, I can't believe he's actually really saying. I'm letting you guys in on this is part of our culture.
This is it. This is it. You get to pull the curtain back and see it for
Yeah.
real. Okay. Thank you so much. I did enjoy that explanation. Jeff wants to know where can he actually go physically to see what's going on. So where can people go to see the actual tour?
So I would say go to the Farmington Historical Society's website or go to our Facebook page, because the Facebook page has a lot of pictures and talks about the tours we've done in the past. But if you go to the website, it tells you to go to 75 Main Street. That's where the First Church of Christ 1652 Congregational Church on Main Street. That's where the tour starts. And we do the tour most Saturdays from June until October. So if you go online to our website, you'll see all the dates that we're doing it.
Thank you. Now, you talked about Fune with his drowning. And hopefully I'm not taking away from the tour.
Actually, I didn't talk about Fune. I talked about Chamberlain.
Chamberlain. You talked about Chamberlain.
Let me say something else too, that the tours are, again, from June until October, and you can go to Eventbrite to buy tickets. And remember, it's a 30-minute oral presentation or storytelling in the meeting house at 75 Main Street. And then there's a 60-minute walking tour, just to be very clear, so people know what we're doing.
Awesome. And I think that mixture is really great because the oral presentation part lays the foundation, and then the actual tour takes them onto that adventure, and they get to use their imagination to see what it was really like and walk in the footsteps of those who they're learning about. So I think that's really great how that has come to fore. I love how you speak to Singbei's courage and his quote unquote audacity that he wanted that coat, but I think it speaks to where he was from. I think it speaks to his awareness of self, his warrior spirit. And I love the fact that you brought in the Freemans, and we won't talk about Miss Freeman. You got to come find out more about her in person. But I just love how the Historical Society has allowed you to give them the guidance that they need to tell these stories in such a dignified way, and that they are willing to be a willing participant to step forward to say, hey, we have these stories. They are important stories. Farmington was the grand central station of the abolitionist movement, correct?
Absolutely.
So now it's time to tell the other side of the story and to include the people in those stories. So I think that they're doing a great job. I think you're doing a wonderful job. So thank you so very much for all that you do. I really do truly appreciate it. Now, is there any one particular person in the stories that you have developed that rings true to you, or that that you can identify with? Is there one particular person?
Let's see. Um, I won't say that I necessarily identify with this individual, but one of the things that, again, humanizes the Mende, but also humanizes um, the abolitionists, in the village of Farmington at the time, is that Austin Williams. He spent a lot of money and a lot of time on making sure that the Mende were okay. Um, but I do know that I was looking at the question that came in real quick.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of our tour, and I like to say a good end, we decided to end our story here is because at the Pitkins Basin, we're kind of wrestling with that, whether we should end it there or go on down to the river where Chamberlain died. But I like when we end at Pitkins Basin because it's where the boats turn around to then go back out to sea. And also, it's where the love story between two different groups, it's where that love story ends. And when I say a love story, we know from reading Austin Williams' letters that these big, strong men were openly weeping after the 8 months and the men they were going to leave. The women, I was going to say, of course, but the women were crying. But Austin Williams makes it a point in his letter to say men were openly weeping. They were crying. So they grew to really respect and love one another. So that is, if nothing else, that's, I really relate to the fact that, to me, the Mende proved that they weren't these savages from the dark continent, and the Mende learned that all white people aren't bad.
Thank you for bringing that part out. I really appreciate the humanity, because a lot of times when enslavement is spoke about, the enslaved are often just looked upon as property and not humanized. So I love the fact that the humanity is put in there, and that you get to see the humanity on both sides. Because, like you said, not all white people are bad, and the Mende definitely were not savages. So I appreciate that humanity aspect of it, which I think is so important for today's viewpoint, because a lot of times, as we know, history is on the chopping block, if you will, some of our history. And it's important to know the accurate story. It's important to put the humanity on it, so that these stories can stay out there and they can stay in the focus, and we can learn from the resiliency and the spirit that they possess to get back to what they knew, and not what someone else expected of them, or to give up, or to give in to what someone else's viewpoint of them was or is. Another question, Jeff asked, how accurate is the film in relation to actual events, and where does it differ?
Oh boy.
That's why
Um,
Hollywood.
Tammy, I think you can answer that question better than I can. I can
um,
answer the question, but not as, I know you can answer that better than me.
all right, I can answer that for you. Jeff, the movie was not that accurate. It was very Hollywoodish. But what I like to talk about, for instance, they do not even mention the children that were there. Sarah Magu, Kime Kanye, Kali. They don't even mention them. So if you're only watching the movie and you don't know the actual story, you don't realize that there are children aboard the Amistad, which again takes away the humanity. They have different actors in position, and it was mainly focused on the white savior versus the resiliency of the people who were trying to get back home. I love the fact that the film was made, And although people like to credit Steven Spielberg, the real credit should go to Miss Debbie Allen. For 13 years, she fought to get this story brought back to the fore. And it's because of her that a lot of the Amistad activity that's happening in Connecticut has come to the fore. So I think we need to make sure we always give her credit as well. Took her 13 years, but it was finally done. And it was done in the form of Hollywood, you know, the glamour and the glitz. But the beauty of that film is that it got us talking, and it helped those of us who never knew about the story learn more about the story, learn of the story, and learn about that resilience and that fighting spirit to be treated as human beings. So even though a good portion of it is not accurate and is Hollywood, it is still getting us talking. It got us talking. Got the replica of the boat remade, and so the Amistad schooner itself is still in existence. Well, the replica, and it has educational programs, and you can see it sailing from New Haven to New London to Bridgeport, and actually in June it will actually be in Martha's Vineyard. So again, movie was Hollywood, but it spearheaded a lot of things that is happening around the Amistad.
Could I interject something here? I just want to dovetail on what you just said and add this, that, for example, there was no talk of the children, and that's why, you know, Kali is the one who said "give us free" in his letter to John Quincy Adams, but you don't know that, and in the movie they actually have Singbe Pia or Joseph Sinkay saying that. And if you saw the movie, you would think that he was the one who maybe originated those lines, but we know it was Kali because we actually have the letters and we see where he wrote that.
Mm-hmm. And so that's the beauty of being a historian and actually doing the research into these historical events, because we get to know. It's sort of like the book versus the movie version. The book always has so much more detail, has so much accuracy, whereas the movie does a lot of chopping and just tries to polarize the imagination. Thank you so much for that question, Jeff. So Andre, as storytellers, we like to bring these stories to life. We like to put the humanity onto the stories. Can you talk to us a little bit more about you as the Greatheart Griot?
As it relates to the tour, the story.
As you as a storyteller, to the story, you as a storyteller in general. Tell us about the Greatheart Griot.
Okay. I told you how I got the name.
Mm-hmm. Tell the audience again how you got the name.
Tell them again?
Did you tell them?
Yeah,
well,
I did.
You told us in the past. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
then
I actually said it today. I got it because my great grandfather decided he didn't want his slave name. So I just thought, that is an, homage to him by taking that name, because it told me a whole lot about my ancestor, that he didn't want the slave name. And instead he just said, no, I'm going to come up with my own name. And the fact that he learned how to read and write sitting outside of the schoolhouse. And, we've got students, who are right there in the classroom and they're not learning anything. And I just thought, wow, he must have been one kind of special person. And so I automatically felt like I got to kind of live up to it, especially if I'm going to, take this as a moniker for myself. And basically my grandmother, if she hadn't told me those stories, Mama Thompson she's told me so many stories, and I tried to get my sister and brother and my family to write the stories down, and they would not write the stories down. And it was during my maybe junior year at South Carolina State, and I would come home in the summer, and I kept saying someone should write these down, because Mama Thompson would just start spinning tales just in the middle of nowhere, just start telling stories. And many times, Tammy, they were the same stories.
Mm-hmm.
My sister and brother didn't want to hear it anymore, but I just kept finding them intriguing, because it's like watching a rerun, or people don't even know what reruns are anymore. or reading a book again. Sometimes you forgot you read this book and you're reading, you go, this is familiar. Oh, I read this already. So I guess what I'm trying to say is every time I heard her tell the stories, instead of being bored, I would hear something new that I didn't realize that she was saying all along. So I was able to piece things together, and I really just got into a love of hearing her stories and realizing that everybody out there has somebody telling them a story, a grandmother, a mother, a father. There are family stories all over the place, and if I learned anything about this being a griot thing, is that everybody has a story.
This is true. Everyone does. And it seems like in every family, there's a gatekeeper. There's one or two of us who are determined to keep these stories alive while everybody else thinks, oh, that's just in the past. But it's people like us who have the imagination,
And
who realizes.
I was reluctant, though. Didn't realize, like, somebody should write them down. Somebody, and my family would be looking at me like, "It's you, fool. You're gonna be the one writing. Aren't you studying English? Write that story down." And Mama Thompson didn't want to tell me. Whenever she saw that I was recording them in any kind of way, she wouldn't tell the story.
Oh, wow. Did you ever ask why she would hesitate or she would stop?
No, you don't ask a bunch of questions.
This is true.
Just go with the flow. And what I would start doing is, like, when she started telling the stories, go out in the hall, write some down, come back and ask a couple questions, write some down. That's how I got it.
All right, here's a question from Mariana. Are there any stories you wish you could include in the tour that you had to cut out because of time?
That is a really good question. One of the stories is about the coat that Singbe Pia bought and ordered. We don't have that in there because we don't have time. What other stories that? Let me see. There are we're always. Let's put it this way. We are always saying no. We got to take something out, or we have to shorten something, because there is a plethora of stories to be told that we just don't have. It would be a 3-hour tour. So I'm trying to think of another story, that just because I want to think of one now, I can't think of another one. But do know that the coat that does not appear in there.
Do you tell the story of when one of the Mende was assaulted?
Yep, we definitely tell that story. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah. I'm not even going to tell it now because you got to come. You have to
exactly got to come see it.
That's one of the major stories, and the reason why we tell that particular story is because it shows the resilience of the Mende. It shows that they can measure they can be disciplined, they can measure their tempers. And we, as African American people and Africans at the time, we had to always learn how to be patient with the culture around us. I mean, Langston Hughes wrote the poem, "We Wear the Mask." And that's all, but that's what that's all about. Wearing the mask, being patient, being calm, when we really just want to go off because we're being disrespected.
Yeah. And the fact that we're expected to take that disrespect and be glad we're being disrespected. Let's see. How many structures from the time are still standing in Farmington, or we have to go to the tour to find out? So Mariana wants to know how many still standing.
It's interesting. I can't give her a number, but I will tell you that the Freedom Trail is a long trail in Farmington, as well as other parts of Connecticut. And there are places on the Freedom Trail that we don't go to in the tour because there's too many of them and they're too far to walk. But we are working on a way for you to go on the walking tour yourself, and we can have an app on the phone so that you can hear us narrate the story. So there are several spots there. We're concentrating on 9 to 10 spots for the tour, but there are several spots. And again, I'm sorry I keep doing this, but if you come to the tour, we will tell you, here are 5 places that we're not going to show you today, but they're around here.
No need to apologize. Got to keep it appetizing. Definitely got to keep the expectation there. So no need to apologize. Well, we're almost out of time. Is there anything else you would like for us to know about what you're doing, what your upcoming projects are, anything that you would like for us to know?
I do want to say that I tried to touch on it when I was talking earlier, that I have a vested interest in telling this story in particular because it has all of the elements of survival of the black man or species in this place, this experiment called America. And it gives insight in, again, the patience one has. And I'm not saying that other people, other races, other genders don't have to have patience. That is not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying, under the circumstances, that a lot of what the Mende dealt with um, when they were here, present day Americans who happen to be people of color are dealing with the same things. And dare I even say that even as my work in my work as a consultant in Farmington and other places as a black professional, I'm facing those same things today.
And sometimes that can be quite exhausting because as a black professional, I can definitely relate to that. And it can be exhausting when trying to just get the equity of treatment, just trying to get the equity of respect. Being black and white spaces can be difficult, but again, I appreciate the work that you are doing, and you are helping the Farmington Historical Society to be the better for it. So thank you again, my friend. I appreciate you showing up. Please, everyone, if you get a chance, go to Farmington Historical Society, go to their website, and book your ticket. Go to Eventbrite and book a ticket and go on this tour. It is a wonderful tour. You'll have a great time, but most importantly, you will learn something about it. Is the tour, before we go, is the tour disabled? Is it accessible for those with disabilities?
So it's a walking tour. So if
Okay.
you can walk, it's accessible. We don't go inside of any building, so we don't need ramps and things like that. Now, the only place that we are actually, I say we don't go into any, but we do go inside of the meeting house. And I think, let me see.
Meeting house is accessible.
Yeah, the meeting
Yeah.
house has a ramp on it, so it's accessible. Everything else is outside, and it's a walking tour. So if you have some problems, issues with walking, there would be the issue. I am thinking of different ways to work that out, where maybe we can talk sometime about having golf carts so
Yeah,
that
that would be great.
people who want to sign up can do that. Maybe that's next year. Who knows? That's it. That's on my dream list.
And dream lists are always great to have. Well, thank you so very much, Greatheart Griot. I appreciate you once again for coming on. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Please remember to tune in June 27th for our next conversations at noon. Again, please do the survey. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know some of the conversations you would like to hear. And until the next time.